Hello fellows, let's talk today about a story time. So I want to tell you a little bit about my own story and my own experiences and why I actually became software developer, what I've done the last 15 years in responsibility of multiple software products, and what it's actually like to be in that position. There are a lot of people I'm talking to, and most of the people I'm talking to are actually employed, which means they work at some company and work on some product which is not really theirs, but it should be in some form. Of course, we're talking about ownership and stuff like that, but it's not very much the same. And I have a lot of mentorings going on, fellowships, where we talk with startup founders who have so many questions about how to actually start right, how to prepare, how to act in the beginning, the thought process of how to get to an actual product, how to invest into things. There are so many questions, but what most people don't really do is think about, do I actually want to become a self-employed person? So maybe people have already done some freelancing, maybe they have done some contracting, and this is of course a form of self-employment, but not like being a, let's say, company owner, a founder or something like that. And it is a little bit like with most things where you become a professional person. For example, when you do things for being a hobbyist or something like that, and you start to make that on a professional basis, things change. And this is the same with being a good software developer and becoming a form of entrepreneur or employee even. Because on some point in time you realize that doing the things you really love to do for so many years is something you do less. And you can't actually do that like you have done it before. And you exchange being a leadership person with being a developer. So of course you are still a developer in some form, and most developers, most CTOs, most tech leads I know, they are still developing, because this is a thing in small to medium-sized companies still to do on some point, but it is a very high-level thing. So it is at best more a mentoring type of person or solving the more complex puzzles, but it's very often not the fun stuff anymore. So with fun stuff, I mean, hey, you actually start to create an app for yourself. You see it growing, build on that every day. You are in feedbacks meeting, and then you basically build in the stuff. You're actually more on the side of talking with clients, talking with investors, talking with people who have ideas of how your app could change things, improve things and stuff like that. So you are more in the long term. You are definitely now more in the strategic area than actually in the operational area where the developers normally are. So of course there is a layer in between where you do a lot as well in the tactical, but it is not that much. So when you are really into creating a business, a sustainable product, you need to have other skills than just being a good developer. And you will quickly see that. This is one thing I see very often is two developers joining together, creating a company, and then they realize that, hey, it's actually quite easy to build a product and quite hard to sell it. And this is one of those points. And oftentimes they build something they really love, which is actually a good idea, but on some point in time, reality will catch you and you will find out if you actually have a market fit or you're actually able to sell the product in any form to create a sustainable business. Because on some point in time, you will realize that building a team software and selling a software, the entire life cycle, is very hard to do as a single person. So you will, for a time, work a lot of hours to actually get both things done at the same time if you start your company. But on some point in time, you need to have a plan to get rid of those, let's say, pressure. Let's call it pressure, right? Because on some point it will eat you up. No matter how much you think you are a great person, on some point it will break you. You can't sustain it. It is simply not possible. There will be always this situation where you suddenly, very suddenly, realize that you are in a burnout situation and need to get out of there as soon as possible. Otherwise, you will end up in a mess you don't want to be. And the best thing you can do actually is to be aware of that very early on and understand that you actually are willing to go that route willing to become an entrepreneurial person who is more thinking about the business and less of being a developer. At some point in time, you should even say, hey, developing is not anymore for me. I am now going into selling a product. This is very much where I am actually. So everything I told you right now, I made wrong in the past. I always wanted to be the developer because it was great fun for me, with starting at the age of 8, right, building things and then really doing the nerdy, geeky stuff. And it was always great. It was always fun to do. It is already 32 years ago when I started to become a developer. And these days, when I do development, it is probably something which stresses me because it's basically out of my regular business hours. So I try to avoid that, even though it's fun. So I sometimes do that in my free time to just don't get disconnected too much. But in reality, you need to be aware of that. And now to the actual story of the last 15 years where I was in responsibility. Building products is something you really can't foresee. That is my biggest learning. There are two aspects which were very significant for me. First of all, I was thinking I could foresee many things. And the other thing is that I was a little bit lazy when it came to determining things in the very beginning. So I made a lot of mistakes because I made a lot of gut feeling decisions. And this is what I see quite often there as well, because people do that because of lack of knowledge and lack of experience, and that is understandable in the beginning. But you should know that if you start a product and you already have problems building it, you should think of if you're actually ready to do that right now. So sometimes it's not the best idea to start with being 20 years old and try to become the next millionaire in tech because you can build an app or you have built an app for yourself already. That is oftentimes not the best thing you can do, because the entire life cycle, having employees, being responsible for all those persons, for the salaries, for everything, is something, a burden, which I can't recommend in the early stages of your career. This is not what you should focus on. That was my big problem when I started 15 years ago, being responsible for others. I was still very much in my developer bubble. I wasn't even seeing myself as an entrepreneurial person. I was thinking in a technological way. I was making decisions in a very technological way, not in a business way. And I think that was the reason why in the first 10 years we built software which became more and more stressful, because we bought a software and we built upon that software because it was a packaged software. The requirements became more complicated. We couldn't do it with some kind of extensions or something like that. The maintainer of the product wasn't willing to do anything in direction, so we needed to do it ourselves. So we built a software on top of that. And instead of really thinking about what we do there, we basically went and just built upon that. And it was my main responsibility. Of course, not the only one who made that decision, but I wasn't able to foresee the actual outcome of that. And I'm not sure if that was a great idea of me being the person in charge to that time, but today I would definitely do it differently. It is always easier after several years of learning, but this is what I wanted to give you as a story element today, is you really need to think about those things early on. You need to understand the consequences. You should bring some experience in those things already when you go into the decision-making area. So you can't just take a leadership role, or it might not be leadership, but management role where you really make business decisions, and in a business role where you really make decisions in the business area, and then just do gut feeling decisions because you're a technical person and you make technical decisions. So that is something I just want to give it to you. So later on, in the later stages, we then adopted to it, and after those 10 years, we really got into new architecture types. We bridged the gap between business and development. This is what I was talking so often about at this lake, actually. And that was a big learning for me. So you need to connect those things. You need to understand why you build things and how they will turn out, how they will be sellable, how those solutions then will provide salaries and enough money for everything in the future. That are the things you really need to take care of. And if you're going to build a company for yourself, make sure you have a plan for exactly that. Because I hear so many people saying, I want to become a leader and a self-employed person. I want to build my next company. I want to find an investor. Actually, I never saw so many people who are happy with their investors. Most happiest entrepreneurs I ever met were basically bootstrapped. And when you are bootstrapped, you need to take care of everything yourself. And that can be very hard as well. I don't want to create here some doubt or something like that. I just want to make you think more than I did in my own past. And there was no videos I could watch about how to do those things in the past. It was a very hidden thing. It was not common to even say you don't know what you do right now. So you always try to look like a tough and experienced person, which you weren't. And today you should be more honest about that and really take advantage of what you can learn out there and prepare for things and really take a look what was working for others and what was not working. And right now I'm doing this session where I'm going into, hey, make or buy decision making. And so we have bought a product in the beginning, and later on we saw that we want to resell that product to others, and that was a bad idea to buy something to resell it, so we needed to make it. But the transition from buying something, built upon that, and then making your own things was a very long story. Today we're building nearly everything ourselves. We tried to compose for quite a while in the style of Mac architecture, but then that turns out to be more complicated than it was actually advantages for us. I will talk about that as well. Leave me some comments if this is interesting for you. Just as a quick wrap up, that is about getting all the things like Auth0, like your CMS system, your CRM system, your shop system, and glue them with some services together to a new application. That is actually a quite good idea, but it turns out to be only good for specific contexts, and our context wasn't one of those good contexts. So we changed on the way, on the journey, our approach and started to build things more ourselves, so making ourselves, even though we reinvented the wheel, but this wheel was actually fitting and the other one was not really fitting. And that is something you need to consider. So you will read a lot of things on LinkedIn, you read a lot of things on blogs, and a lot of this stuff is evergreen content. So it makes sense to read it and it's hard to argue against it. But when you are in the situation yourself, when the stakes are high, you pay money for that. It's your personal money. You basically waste there when you make decisions. Then you know what's working and what's not working. And that is what I want to tell you today about this story is you really need to make the experiences yourself. And it does make sense to try to get some experience actually before you start and then gather new experiences. Oftentimes it doesn't make sense to start something alone. Maybe you join a company which is already doing something and can assist you there. That's oftentimes the better thing. Or join a company as a tech lead who is then in the end helping you, to mentor you, helping you with coaching to get into that situation. And maybe join them on the long run or build something on your own then when you have gathered your own experience so far, right? So for our journey, it was a little bit like this 10 years of trying to get rid of the problems we created in the beginning, the technical part, then moving towards more ways of developing software yourself and a lot of stuff in between. And it was actually an interesting story, right? So I'm happy that I've made it that way because I learned a lot. I can talk about that a lot, but it was painful. And I want to warn you that being a self-employed person can be something very painful. It is fulfilling, but painful at the same time. So be aware of that and don't take it the easy route, especially when you need to employ persons and pay salaries. Make sure you have enough responsibility and accountability and ownership to actually do that correctly. And when you hear about how you do things or all these microservices versus monolith stuff or type of things like which language to use, there are so many discussions out there which actually don't have anything to do with the actual business outcome or not. It is most often not the case that the technology is really ruining your business or not. It can happen. I saw it happen, But in reality, it is more what happens outside of the tech when it comes to business. It is really the business, it's the people, it's the leadership, it's the management. It is, do you create stress, right? Do you have a good culture? Are you able to create outcome in the end, even with a worse product? So in those 10 years, the reason why I'm still here today is because even though that product wasn't very well made, especially not the framework on top of the other one, it was working, it was creating money, it was a really good legacy system. And that is what it was about. So the reason why I'm still here today as a self-employed person is that we have had a viable business solution, that we made in the end the right decisions where it comes to personal management, to employees, how to set up culture and those kind of things. So those things you really need to understand in order to build a successful product. The best technology skills won't help you to sell your product or create a good culture, which your software in the end is depending on. So I hope that helped you a little bit. Story-wise, I will continue with a format like that. Let me know if that is something you want to hear about more often. I want to be, let's say, less of this evergreen content. I want to really talk about things, really start the camera when I have a thought. So leave me a comment, send me some messages. If you have feedback for this, I wish you a great day and a successful week. See you next time then. Goodbye, fellows.